This is Studio 809.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Outdoors with Hiking Bob podcast. I'm your host, Hiking Bob Falcone. You can find me on my website at hikingbob.com, which has links to my social media, my columns at the Colorado Springs Independent, all the other podcasts we've done, and my photography website. You can also drop me an email if you have a comment, question, or suggestion for a topic for the podcast. All of that at hikingbob.com. Today, my special guest is Britt Haley, the Director of Colorado Springs Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services. I get yelled at sometimes leaving out the cultural services. Not intentional, but my focus, of course, is on parks and recreation. But Britt, thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. It's always good to see you.
It's a blast having you on here. And we try to get together on the podcast right around the beginning of the year like we are now to kind of talk about what happened during the previous year and what we have coming forward, going forward into the new year, what we can expect as residents of Colorado Springs and users of our parks and things like that. So I guess I'll let you start off with what were the big accomplishments of the Parks Department in 2024?
Oh, there are almost countless accomplishments.
That's good.
It's so surprising to me when I look back and I think, well, that was only 3 months ago, but it feels like it was years ago because so much happens in this incredible park system that we have that does encompass so many things, including Garden of the Gods and our beautiful open space system and our trails and our sports facilities, community centers, all of the cultural resources that we have, the Pioneers Museum, and, of course, just all the programs and recreation and youth activities and events that we get the opportunity to be the hosts for. So truly looking back, it's hard to pick out favorites, but one of the things that I think was one of the biggies was when we were able to reopen the Pioneers Museum after its incredible makeover. And we reopened that project to so many people wanting to get back in the museum and revisit it. And I didn't know how many people missed being able to go to the Pioneers Museum while it was under construction. It did a comprehensive HVAC project that then also enabled us to provide an expansion of exhibit space and some new incredible exhibitions, one that focuses on women and women's art and was really a work that was done by Leah Witherow, Davis Witherow. Mm-hmm. So feels so good about the reopening of the Pioneers Museum, and we were all concerned here in the Parks Department to make sure that we took extra special care of this incredible resource for the community. And we were also concerned you just don't know what you're going to find when you start going through the ductwork in a building that's 125 years old.
And peeling back the old wallpaper and all that kind of stuff.
It was fascinating, actually, to see.
And for people who may not be from Colorado Springs, or if you're new here, the Pioneers Museum downtown is the old El Paso County Courthouse. It's a beautiful it's a building you would expect it would look like that was built when Colorado Springs was founded in the 1900s, late 1800s, 1900s. It is exactly what you would expect it to look like. Beautiful building. And El Paso County almost sold it, demolished it, got rid of it, and the city was incredibly smart enough to latch onto it and make it a museum. If I have all that correct, I'm pretty sure that I remember that's how that went down.
It's almost like going back in time as you enter this beautiful building, and you can imagine going to court in the courtrooms. And in fact, we were able to repurpose the judge's bench into the front desk area. So go look and see, and you'll be able to imagine a judge sitting there and, processing cases in the early days of Colorado Springs.
Did the new reworking of it keep the old courtroom intact like you had, the one courtroom still
All
intact
of the
there?
murals are intact,
Okay.
but it's exhibit space now so that we can tell the story of Colorado Springs and the Pikes Peak region and watch for new exhibits because we're going to have some really fascinating stories to tell.
It's a beautiful building. It's even been used as a backdrop for movies, and if you research it, you find a couple of movies that you may have seen that use Colorado Springs as Pioneers Museum as the backdrop. So it's pretty cool. It's a beautiful building, and it's just one of those old, it's exactly what you would expect a courthouse from that time period to look like, and it's gorgeous.
It is, and the importance of doing the HVAC upgrades was, number one, we had water trickling in places that you can't have water in a place with so many artifacts. And we did the temperature control and the humidity control were more important for the artifacts and their preservation than for the visitors, but everybody is more comfortable now.
Awesome. Well, great. That's wonderful. Let's talk about Garden of the Gods for a minute. Somebody sent me a picture the other day of a hat they bought at a local store, a chain store, to their defense, but it said Garden of the Gods National Park. Like, not so fast.
City park.
It's a city park. It's a national historic monument, but that's not the same as being a national monument. It's not a national monument, not a national park. National Park Service doesn't run it. It is strictly a city-owned and operated treasure we have in the community.
It's a treasure is right. I mean, it's one of the things I think we are certainly proud of, and it's iconic to the city of Colorado Springs. And that space, along with the Rockledge Ranch historic site, are just fascinating places to go, but also incredibly beautiful. Last year, we engaged in what I think is one of the most protective actions that has been taken in the past 100 years for that park, and that is to start a waterline project with fire hydrants and firefighting capacity within the park to protect this incredible resource. So we are always a little bit concerned whenever we have to close portions of the road in the park in order to facilitate that work. And in a lot of cases, where the water line is going is under trail that's already existing. So we have to pull up the trail and then put the water line in and then put the trail back in over it in concrete to protect everything. But we're making good progress, and we're very excited about having that capacity to really protect the park in case there was a fire that came in to the park.
And that project, if I remember correctly, is also serving some of the neighborhoods immediately adjacent to the park that had inadequate water supply and fire hydrants and things like that. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we are partnering with Colorado Springs Utilities and the Colorado Springs Fire Department, and it's the Columbia neighborhood that had insufficient pressure in some of its fire hydrants in the neighborhood and needed a water line with extra capacity to provide that pressure. So it's a benefit to the neighbors next door, as well as in the future, we will have the capacity to upgrade some of the restroom facilities and make that a better experience for our people who are in the park as well. But I think the key thing is our stewardship of this incredible natural landscape in terms of having 8 fire hydrants available along the pathway that it runs in order to protect what we have. And people around me always hear me say, I want to take care of what we have. And right. This is exactly what that waterline project is doing for us.
When is that project expected to be completed?
Well, we're hoping late April, May, to make sure that we are ready for the visitors that we expect will come. And with every construction project, it's hard to know exactly how it's going to go, and we are seeing good progress, but we definitely want to be prepared for our visitors.
It's been a fairly mild winter, so I'm assuming that that's probably been working to your benefit.
So far, so good on that.
Cool.
Progress.
So let's talk a little bit more about Garden of the Gods, because one of my favorite places, and there's not a photographer out here who hasn't taken a bazillion pictures of Garden of the Gods. And I imagine during the photo contest that you have every year, there's probably, I'm imagining 80% of the pictures are from Garden of the Gods. And you have to try to find stuff that's not necessarily from there. How was visitorship there last year 2024 compared to previous years?
I haven't drawn the numbers up, but as we were looking at the third quarter numbers for last year, we were slightly ahead, both for Garden of the Gods and then Pikes Peak, America's Mountain. The Pikes Peak Highway was seeing a lot of visitation, like a banner year.
Wow.
So we know that we are getting all of that visitation, and people are learning about the Pikes Peak region and really embracing our park system. And I hear from so many people how incredibly amazed they are that the city of Colorado Springs has these resources in its park system. Right. We're truly unique, and I never want to take that for granted.
A 14,000-foot peak you can drive to almost any day of the year, depending on the weather. It's
Very nearly.
No seasonal closures, which I think some people think, oh, it must be closed in the winter. Nope. If we can plow the road, it's open.
Yes, and last year we had our first avalanches in quite a long time. Prior avalanches were in 2007, I believe, and so it's not a common thing, but those things can happen,
Sure.
and they're very hard to get all the snow removed and back up to the facilities that we manage, and we have an obligation to keep those open. So our team, and I want to especially recognize the staff of Pikes Peak and Skylar Rorabaugh, their manager, they work so hard to make sure that wonderful Summit Visitor Center is available as many days as we can possibly safely make that happen.
The visitor center up there is gorgeous, too. It opened up a few years ago, and it's beautiful. I really like it. I just, after the old bunker that used to be up there, it's so much nicer. We're going to circle around back to Pikes Peak here in a little bit because there's some other news about that. What other big things happened with the Parks Department in this past year? Well,
Panorama Park continued to gain recognition with more awards. So it was recognized by the Colorado Lottery as one of the projects which was the best example of expenditure of lottery funds. And of course, we put a lot of different sources of funding into Panorama Park, but lottery funds were certainly important to making that happen. And they recognized the city with a Starburst Award, but for the first year ever, they also did an award called the People's Choice Award. And out of the 14 projects that were elevated to Starburst status, there was a competition, and you could vote on your favorite. So we were all voting within their rules. You can vote once a day.
Yeah.
We all had it on our task to do that.
Come in the morning, vote, and get to work.
It's so true. And I know the Rise Coalition and many of our partners were doing that religiously. And we were chosen for the very first People's Choice Award on top of the Starburst Award, and that was absolutely incredible. It was awarded at the Colorado Parks and Recreation Association conference, and we only beat out Lake San Cristobal by 52 votes.
Wow.
So they also had a team of people who were absolutely willing to vote, and I know that you're familiar with that landscape. It's very a worthy project as well. And I have to recognize that all of the Starburst winners were incredible projects all across the state. But Panorama Park came out on top, and I'm really proud of that.
Oh, you should be. And to be fair, like you said, if any park system made it to that final stage, they had to be an incredible project to make it there. So that's everybody in the state really doing their job and making great places for us to go to.
Yes.
You had a big project this past year, the Blodgett open space and master plan process, getting through that. A little contentious at times, I think, would not be overstating it, but it's processed through. It's the master plan is gone. Where can people expect that to go?
So, the Blodgett...
I know I'm kind of jumping around between last year and this year, but everything kind of runs together.
No, they go together, and I think you're right. The TOPS Working Committee and the Parks Advisory Board wanted us to pursue the master plan and implementation projects for the Blodgett open space and for Fisher's Canyon open space. And so we're lucky and really appreciative of the process. Now, you'd mentioned that Blodgett was contentious, and it really was. But what I can say about that is I am grateful still to everybody who took part in that process. We had over 4,000 people involved in it. And a lot of times in city government, you hold a public meeting and you hope that the staff doesn't outnumber the number of people that come. But with parks, trails, open spaces, and our programs, people care so much that they're willing to give their time and come and answer our surveys and really participate. And I know we got that participation. What emerged from that is a lot of folks looking for different ways to enjoy our mountain backdrop, because that's what Blodgett open space really does protect, is the backdrop that can go all the way from the United States Air Force Academy boundary to Cheyenne Mountain State Park and Fort Carson. So we know that is of value to the city. And there are recreationalists who want to do different things in those spaces, and sometimes the different user groups don't have the same opinion about what should happen where. I felt like with additional neighborhood meetings, we were able to really get some consensus on some of our trailheads and a lot of the work that we'd like to pursue after that master plan was approved. And when it came down to it, when it was appealed to City Council after the Parks Board approved it, was a concern by about a handful of people. So going from essentially 4,000 people down to about 25 or so who's remained concerned. And I know that we will work on those areas that they had as concerns, and that will be top of mind for us as we move forward. So in 2025, the good news is that we have the dollars available in our fund, not only from the prior year's work to identify some implementation capacity, but in the 2025 budget, we also have trail money associated with Blodgett open space to be able to then follow through on the trails component. So that's an exciting thing for us to be able to do. And then, of course, we're also following on the heels of the Blodgett master plan with Fishers Canyon open space. And we're going to have our next meeting for the public on the 22nd of this month, so next week, to show everyone the proposal or the draft based on all the surveys, the public process that happened with Fishers. And again, lots of really good participation, and so grateful that people are willing to give their time and their thoughts to help us really formulate the best plan for that space. It seems to me that every open space has its own personality, and so we're seeing that kind of shine through between Fishers and Blodgett.
Yeah, Fishers Canyon is going to be an entirely different environment, up against Cheyenne Mountain as opposed to Blodgett Peak and just different neighborhoods around there and different densities around there and traffic. It's there are two bookends, I think. If you look west and you look at Pikes Peak in the middle, then you have these two bookends on either side. You have Fishers Canyon up against Cheyenne Mountain, and then you've got Blodgett open space against Blodgett Peak with the Air Force Academy next to it. But they connect. I mean, everything's connected in between. I said contentious, but in reality, the contention wasn't a bad thing. I don't think it was a bad thing. And for, having been involved in that process, the Parks Department develops what they think people want, and they present that to the public, and then this feedback comes back from the public. The contention was that people didn't necessarily want as big a project as it was initially put out for Blodgett. That's fine. And I think what came out of that was, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that whole process was geared towards giving the people what they wanted.
Absolutely. And I guess the thing that I can always point to is that we make modifications based on what people tell us. We don't just move on and do our own thing. And that was very clear in Blodgett. Yeah. When the appeal was filed with City Council, I told our staff I was happy to see that because it gave us an opportunity to tell our story to City Council. And I think it was very well received and very well researched. And I also want to acknowledge the folks in the community around Blodgett Open Space. They were very good participants. They were able to get their points across that were maybe in opposition in some cases to what we were offering without being difficult to the staff. And I always thought, it's nice to be able to communicate different ideas without being hard on people.
Right.
And our staff works so hard. They're really dedicated people. They mean well and they want to do right. And so when that's acknowledged by people who disagree with what we're offering, and then we make changes to adapt it to a better outcome, then everybody wins.
And there were a lot of changes to that plan from what was initially proposed to what ended up being approved. 18 months later, I think it was, or pretty close to it.
You're right, 18 months.
Yeah, so, there was a lot of changes. Now it's because the community, both the neighbors immediately around there and the entire city, chimed in on what they wanted. And there was a little less of this, a little more of that kind of thing. And I'm grossly simplifying it, but, parking may have been not as big as initially planned, and maybe not as many trails as initially planned, and maybe reworking that. But in the long term, it's here's what we have an idea for. What do you want? And that's how that process went. A lot of time very time-consuming, longer than anticipated to get there. But in the long term, for the most part, people got what they wanted. You're not going to give everybody everything they want. That's just not going to happen. But you can get pretty close.
I'm very proud that the plan moved forward, and I'm sure that we will be working through some of the, we call it adaptive management. If we start hearing from the neighborhoods that people are parking on their streets and in their driveways, and there needs to be a review of what we need to do next, then the plan provides for that, and we will have more public meetings about it and then see what to do next. So it allows us to adapt, and I really like that. I think that's a natural thing to be able to adapt. Yeah. And so the Blodgett master plan, I think, is going to be really nice for everybody who comes to enjoy the trails and the wildlife and the incredible scenery. One
of my favorite places to go to. It's just a beautiful spot, and so much different topography in there, and different viewscapes that you can see. There's so much different stuff going on there.
And I should say that we are always grateful here. I was part of the people that got to do the acquisition process for that. And if we didn't have that space, it would be a loss to our system. And we're just grateful for the TOPS program and for the capacity and support for acquisitions that make it possible to connect all the way from the Air Force Academy down to Cheyenne Mountain State Park.
There's going to be a lot of rooftops in there instead of a lot of open space to use.
Correct.
I think that's a safe assumption anywhere around here, that if it's not an open space, it's probably going to be rooftops.
And you never want to forget that was the alternative at the Blodgett buffer area in between the Oak Meadows neighborhood and the quarry, and it was the case with Red Rock Canyon open space that had a development plan for a resort.
Right.
So, yes, we have been able to balance those and always retain these beautiful landscapes for the public to enjoy and wildlife habitat to remain where it is. And that makes me grateful.
Let's talk about the quarry just real briefly. Still not part of the city property. It's still privately owned, but being reclaimed. Is that moving along pretty well? Where do you think is going to go with that?
Yeah, the owners of the Pikeview Quarry have been working with the Parks Department to make sure that as they move forward through the required reclamation, that they're doing so in a way that would make it a property that we would want to have in our portfolio, our inventory. And I am grateful for that spirit of working together and thinking about the future in that way. So right now, all I can say is that I've watched the reclamation happen over the past year, and many people, as they drive in, can see it happening. And it really is looking good. So fingers crossed that we can move forward with that as well. But I'm very, very excited about the outcome there.
Okay. The other quarry that's above there, it was part of the Black Canyon quarry. I know that we're probably, looking at that happening, but anything happened with that last year, or is that just kind of getting ramped up?
Yeah, so last year we were able to get a pretty substantial grant from the Department of Local Affairs, $300,000 to augment the money that we'd been putting aside. It's a much smaller quarry, but it also requires reclamation. And one of our big projects this year in the open space category of TOPS is to work on reclamation at that quarry. So the views there are incredible as well. Yeah. So I am really glad. Originally, when we were doing the land acquisitions, I was really focused on the buffer piece in between the neighborhoods and the Pikeview quarry. And then we went up to the Black Canyon quarry, and I realized that the potential there was maybe 3 times the potential on the edge of the city. So we're able to pick up some really nice properties, but they do need some work.
Cool. What other interesting stuff? We've kind of talked about a couple of the big projects that have happened here in town, but what other kind of big stuff has happened here? How have things gone with, like, say, the sports side of things, the youth sports and things like that?
We have been able to really produce some great programming for youth sports and adult sports too, but I think the youth sports is what appeals to a lot of people. And many of our parks, I think people may not recognize the true impact economically that those parks have on our community. So we really put a pretty big focus on looking at economic vitality as it relates to the big parks that do the events, that do the sports efforts, and obviously Garden of the Gods and some of those that all draw. Whenever your family comes to town and you want to take them to something, where would you go? Would you go to John Venezia Community Park? Would you go to the spray grounds, at Panorama Park? Would you go to Memorial Park for the Balloon Festival? All of those visitors have an impact, and in a good way. So, one of the things that was an early goal of our new leadership with Mayor Yemi and his team was to look at the lodgers and automobile rental tax with City Council and to work through a process where parks might get better support financially for the impacts of that, but then also to celebrate and provide those spaces that really do bring economic vitality to our city.
The other big issue that was had a lot of publicity, a lot of interaction, was the e-bikes, electronic bikes, electronic assisted bikes, electrically assisted bikes, all the different names in and around our city parks and trails. It's a complicated issue in Colorado Springs. It's not nearly as easy an issue to resolve as even if you just take a step the other direction and go into El Paso County parks, which have a different, or state parks here. Can you summarize kind of A, why that's a more complicated issue here, and B, what happened with that in the last year and what's going forward this year with that?
Sure. I guess we can acknowledge that the City of Colorado Springs Parks Department has been wrestling with this issue for quite some long time, even before I became director, trying to find the right way to steward our resources, recognizing that electrical assisted bicycles are being used pretty heavily all across the Pikes Peak region. Our neighbors in El Paso County were ahead of us in developing a policy for the use of these devices, I'll call them. And the City of Colorado Springs really needs to catch up with having an e-bike policy. There were a lot of people that kind of look at it superficially and say to us, well, look, the state of Colorado has adopted electrical assisted bicycle policy. El Paso County has. Cheyenne Mountain State Park has. All of your neighbors, have something about it, and yet you're struggling. Why is that the case? And the fact is, we are unique because we have the Trails, Open Space, and Parks program. And that ordinance addresses a prohibition on motorized use. In our City of Colorado Springs code, we have adapted all of the state versions of e-bike policy into our traffic code. So on the streets and in the bike lanes, we're similar to the state and to the county in some ways, but we haven't adapted it for the park system. And it's hard for people to understand that who use the bikes, because if they're permitted on some of our regional trails that cross into the city from El Paso County, they don't see any difference and they don't know where the line is, and they want to follow policy. And that's what makes it hard for all of our users when they don't have clear rules. Right now, we prohibit the use of these devices, but recognizing that needs to be aligned, we have worked forward with a task force that we put together with diverse voices. We didn't just want one opinion, but we also relied on people with really a great deal of expertise, former Parks Board chairs, people from the community with a lot of knowledge. We had an El Paso County representative, and we really worked through what are the recommendations for the City of Colorado Springs and what it needs to do, and came up with some recommendations that we then took out to a survey of the community, and again got incredible participation in the survey. And I was really happy to see that. It was over 3,500 people responding to the survey in various ways about how they view bike policy. Ultimately, what that survey showed us is that there was some support for having the lower speed electrical assisted bicycles on our system. There was not really support in the survey for the class 3, the faster ones, except on roadways and in places that people felt were really safe for that use. So we've taken that forward after consulting with my upper leadership and with our Parks Board and our TOPS Working Committee and really getting varied results because people have different opinions. So the TOPS Working Committee felt it was okay to define e-bikes the same as the state, but really didn't feel comfortable going forward with a definition of motorized use. Parks Board went the opposite direction and said, we actually think if you're going to allow motorized use, you might as well go ahead and allow the class 3 faster e-bikes. And now we're going to City Council with our same proposal, which was to have the lower speed ones allowed on our regional and urban trails, and only the class 1s, which you have to pedal in order to propel the bike, those would be allowed anywhere a bike could go. And so we're having a big conversation about it. And it's what it turns out that people may not see in the beginning is that it is complex and people have very strong and legitimate feelings about it. And I want to say that I respect the people who don't agree with our policy. However, I think it's the right policy to have moving forward, and that it's only fair to the community to give them a policy. So we are moving forward to City Council in February with our proposal. It's an ordinance with definitions, so it takes 2 visits to City Council for votes, and we will see where that ends up at the end of February.
It's going to be interesting, I think. Been like a couple of months. So this was all like finalized back in December, I believe it was. And now it's got a couple of months till City Council gets to it in February. Have you got any additional feedback on the proposal going forward? Or is everybody just kind of waiting and see what City Council does?
I think that what I'm hearing is there are really 2 different versions of constituencies. One of them says, we don't have any problem with expanding e-bike permissions, but we want a process that would take it to a ballot so that there's a vote of the people saying that they support that. And I respect that position. It's not the position that we're taking. We're taking the position that City Council has the authority to clarify terms that are either undefined or confusing. And in this case, we're not modifying the TOPS ordinance at all. It's just providing definitions in the overall section that applies to everything in our system for meanings that aren't included in TOPS. So understanding that side of it, they're saying e-bikes are probably okay so long as the vote of the people says they're okay. And then there's another group of folks that really think, well, knowing that e-bikes are already in use all over the system, we are more comfortable with them on the urban, the wide urban trails, the commuter trails, and within the urbanized setting, and we're less comfortable with them out in the open spaces where there's wildlife habitat and a lot of use. So I'm seeing those 2 divisions of support or opposition, and I think they're valid. They're valid positions.
They seem like they are two valid positions, but it's just a matter of figuring out which direction to go. I mean,
we had to choose a direction here at the staff level, and we did take that forward in what we think is the most responsible way for the entire system. Coming out of the TOPS program, I started very focused on TOPS, and as director, I need to be focused on everything in our system.
Right.
And having that alignment and continuity of permissions it's an important thing, and we do need a policy one way or the other.
I think it's safe to say, and you've wrestled with this in the past over other topics, that the TOPS program, a great program, raises millions of dollars a year for acquisition. Red Rock Canyon open space would not be a thing. Fisher's Canyon would not be a thing. Blodgett open space would not be a thing. So many places would not happen without that. But there are restrictions that were put into that ordinance, which was completely citizen driven, that have as the city's expanded, created a patchwork where this piece of land, Ute Valley Park is a prime example. Half of it is existing city property, a park, and the other half is a Tops property, and they have different rules. And an unintended consequence, and now that carries over to e-bikes, where the city could have just passed an ordinance simply, or you could have just made a rule in your department on e-bikes, but the Tops ordinance, which encompasses a lot of these interconnecting places, is a complicating factor. And that doesn't mean that Tops is a bad program. It just, I don't think anybody 20 some odd years ago saw, things are interconnecting and there's a inconsistency in rules that apply to different places.
Absolutely.
So going to be interesting to see what happens in February.
I know. I can say that we've put all of our best effort toward getting to a good answer and offering all of the information that will help our policymakers with that decision. And being respectful of the different positions, I still would say that the simplest and least expensive and most comprehensive way is the one that we are proposing.
As a user, it seems to me, you mentioned trails that come out of the county, go into the city, go back out of the county, the Santa Fe Trail and the Pikes Peak Greenway, a prime example of that. Starts in Palmer Lake, goes through the Air Force Academy, goes through Colorado Springs, ends up in Fountain. The people using that, A, may not know that they're going through so many different jurisdictions, and B, they shouldn't have to care.
Right.
They should have to care that they get on at one place, they can get off somewhere else, and
they're not doing anything wrong by using our park system
Exactly.
and enjoying the outdoors and getting all the benefits that we have been able to provide to the community. I mean, we are unique because we have these spaces, and this weird patchwork of jurisdictional question marks isn't fair to them.
Right. A consistency from one end to the other is what people should have. I mean, they should expect that and should obviously are entitled to that. So we'll see how this goes. You know,
another thing that I've heard from a lot of community members is just it's more inclusive to allow the use of these kinds of bicycles for people that either are recovering from surgery or recovering. We had a member of the TOPS working committee who had previously had cancer, and she was able to ride with her husband as she recovered and wouldn't have been able to do that without the e-bike to help her. And I just feel like it makes our spaces more available to all kinds of different people who want to get the benefits of what we offer.
Exactly. Cool. Well, we'll see how that goes. The community centers were an issue kind of this past year, especially the one on the west side. How's that? How have things kind of resolved themselves with the West Side Community Center?
I am really thrilled with the West Side Community Center. It turned into even better than we thought it could turn out in terms of when we first took it over, there was a lot of community concern that we wouldn't be providing those spaces for the kinds of activities that most benefit really the neighborhood and the community in the western part of our city. And what we saw was really participation from a lot of organizations that want to provide the very services that people hoped would happen. They wanted youth and senior and all things in between. We have indoor pickleball, all kinds of wonderful expressions of what a community center should provide the community. And the other thing that happened that I hadn't anticipated is that while we were doing the construction project for the senior center, the YMCA asked if they could hold the programming that otherwise would have been held at the senior center at the West Side Community Center. So we really were able to support one of our best partners in allowing a space for those programs. And I'm just so proud of Felicia Barnhart, who is the community center's director, and Mark Snow, and the working committee that was formed by the community members who wanted to help us get that up and rolling, because now that community center is just providing all of the community services and programs that you would hope a community center would be able to provide. And it's such a nice variety with the community gardens, and just it has its own personality, and it's really serving that very community. But it's also providing rental spaces and programs that otherwise wouldn't have been provided, and it's supporting itself. My fear when we first took this on, and I think our prior mayor's fear, is that we wouldn't be able to afford what it costs to run something like that. And because of the rentals and because of the leased space and the programming, we have been able to do that.
So it's supporting itself, which is awesome.
It is partially supporting itself, but we couldn't do it without that partial support.
So it's taking the load off of your budget, the taxes and stuff like that.
Right. We just weren't ready to take on additional cost, but we couldn't also lose the opportunity for this wonderful resource.
Sure.
And then we also got American Rescue Plan Act dollars allocated to the West Side Community Center for various needs that it had. And that was a special time when more money could go there that otherwise would not have been available. So it was just really good timing for not only that particular campus to receive new roofs, HVAC systems. There's some tunnel stabilization underneath that has to be done, and the dollars came in for that at the right time. The transfer of operational control went really well. The working committee has been super helpful, and the community has really supported it. And so with all of those things working together, the West Side Community Center is just flourishing.
Awesome. Well, it's great to hear that that's working out really well. It sounds like and I've been kind of tracking what's been going on there, and it seems like things are really coming together. And you don't want to lose a place like that on the west side of town. It's a very dense neighborhood. They need a place like that. There's not they're adjacent to a lot of open space, but within that neighborhood, there's not a lot. So you need a place like that for people to be able to gather and things like that. So
it's a special place.
Yeah, it's very special. It's cool. One other topic is the Urban Ranger program that was a couple of years in the making, kind of took off this past year.
That's right. We got fully staffed, and we really got our protocols in place for the Urban Ranger team, which is housed out of a recent park acquisition, the PEO chapter house at 1819 Cheyenne Road. We call it Stratton Park because it is a fragment of a historic park that we were able to bring back into the inventory, but that's where the office. And so they are able to really conduct more of the enforcement ranger approach to making our trail system in the urban areas and downtown much more welcoming. They're able to support our partners in both the homeless outreach team in Colorado Springs Police Department and the HOP team in the fire department to really be eyes and ears on the trail to really help make those spaces so much more available to everybody in the trail system.
And that's a four-person?
It's a four-person team. They have a ranger supervisor, and we were lucky to be able to hire an individual who was a trained police officer. And so he has put together a fantastic team, and they have just really been able to assist, and they were even award-winning last year. So 1 year in, already award-winning. So we're going to have to hold them to a higher standard now that that's the case.
Awesome. So let's move on to 2025. What's coming up? First thing, how did the Parks Department do in the 2025 budget?
I was really glad to see that even though it was a pretty flat budget year in terms of what was available across the city, that we were supported for our team. One of the things that the office was able to do was to make sure that our compensation remained focused on the high performers. For those folks, it's not a big increase for anyone. I think there was 2% allocated for the high performers. But that focus, I think, was very much appreciated across the department. Definitely, we've got a lot of trail projects coming forward in 2025, and so you can see excellent work on the trails. So we're really excited about that. I mentioned the Black Canyon Quarry project that we're doing. So that's another big one. The implementation at Blodgett with the trails. And then, of course, finishing up the Fishers Canyon Open Space Master Plan process and hoping to have some implementation there as well. So you'll see some things in all of the sections that we like to focus on moving forward. And it's always nice when you are in a flat year to be able to still move forward without being concerned about being substantially reduced.
When I interviewed Mayor Yemi a couple months ago, and the budget process was still kind of in the works, one one of the things he had indicated that was looking like was there at least would not be any additional cuts coming, that you had taken some cuts in 24 from 23, but it didn't look like there was going to be any additional ones. That still was in the final wash when everything got done. Did that hold true?
That's true. So we maintained the prior reductions, but everybody took the same reduction, and that was because some pretty significant voices stood up on our behalf and said, let's have everyone share that load. And so it was a 3.4% cut, and it certainly was hard for us, but it wasn't devastating.
Right.
And so we maintained that, but we're able to move forward with projects and staffing and not cut any positions, and that was really meaningful to us to have that support. Some of the focal points that Mayor Yemi has in his initiatives on economic vitality, public safety, infrastructure. He acknowledges right off the bat that parks are critical infrastructure. And so we're able to do a playground renovation this year because that budget supported it. So I know that where there is capacity, we're able to really move some things forward. Awesome.
Well, that's good. Everybody could see coming that, tax revenue was pretty flat. So everybody was a little concerned about it, at least that there were no additional cuts. You still took a cut from the previous year, but there was no additional cuts this year.
Right.
At least you're able to maintain. So that's a positive step, and hopefully 2025 will be a little better. Hopefully,
I think in a presidential election year, sometimes the economy is, uncertain, and we saw a lot of volatility from month to month, and it came out fairly even, and that was okay.
Yeah, people just don't know where things are going, so they're a little hesitant to, what am I doing? What am I looking forward to? And regardless of how things turn out, I think people just want an answer, and then when they get that, then they can get into a groove, I guess, and get into the thing.
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to go exactly to that topic of looking into 2025.
Sure.
One of the biggest things that we will be pursuing as a department is we are going to submit for the first opportunity at reaccreditation from the Commission on Accreditation of Park and Recreation Agencies. There are only 3% of all of the parks departments, all of the eligible ones across the country that have achieved accreditation. We did that for the first time in 2020, and I'm excited to say today is the day that we submit our application for reaccreditation. Last year we were practicing. We went through a mock accreditation. It's like the biggest audit that you would ever sign up for voluntarily. So we're excited about it, but it's going to be a big deal.
So what can the public expect to see during this reaccreditation process?
During the process, we will have a visit from a committee of specialized people who are from the commission, and there will be some public outreach on those things. And they will really review all of our policies, all of our procedures, how we do things. There are 154 standards that we have to meet. And it's a really rigorous review. And then later in the year, we'll find out sometime in September if we've been reaccredited. The reason we do it is all of our really significant departments in the city are accredited by their national agencies. And the goal is to have someone else make sure that you are constantly improving. They always move the marker on us and make it a little bit harder the next time around. So we know that we have improved, and that gives better service to the community. It also makes us much more credible when we apply for grant funding or if we have donations. Those donors know that we have the financial policies and the fiscal restraints in place to make sure that we are going to follow through on the projects that we engage in. And then, really it just puts us in that excellent category as it relates to everything that we do, and means that we're not taking our foot off the gas when it comes to always doing better.
When I was a firefighter, and the fire department I was on, not Colorado Springs, went through an accreditation process, very in depth. The committee is typically people from fire departments all over the country that are themselves accredited, and they have these standards. And I know there that you sometimes didn't quite always meet the standards. So what you said was, if accredited, we will, next time you come, have met those standards. Is that kind of similar to what happens with this one? Is, we're at this point, and when you come back to reaccredit us, we're going to be at a point further down the road. And one of the things they're looking at is, did you make that promise? Did you meet that promise that you made?
It's my understanding with our commission that there are certain standards you have to meet, and you would not get accreditation in the first place if you didn't meet them. And then there are other standards that you can improve on if you didn't meet the level. And so the first time around, we met almost all of them, and certainly the ones that were the fundamental standards we did meet. But we know we've improved on certain standards even today. And then the other thing that they do is sometimes they change the standards, and that's what they did with us. And so between 2020 and our reaccreditation effort in 2025 this year, there have been changes to the standards that focus on different goals or achievements, because parks departments and their recreation systems and all of their community engagement and cultural services, all of those things are evolving. So we know the standards evolve as well. So we're measuring how well we did last time, and we know that we've improved many things, and so we're looking forward to that opportunity. The other thing, I'll just brag a little bit, is I know that some of the members of the committee that are coming to review our system are coming from places like Texas and Oklahoma, and they're directors of those departments, which are accredited, but they don't have Garden of the Gods and Pikes Peak and Red Rock Canyon open space and Blue Stem Prairie open space. It's exciting to be able to show them the things that we have, because some places are very much an urban park system, and they may have a recreation center or pool facilities or spray grounds, but they don't have the entire system to show off that we do. And so it's almost a very exciting opportunity to really show what we have and show our work.
Not too many places have a park or a park facility at 14,000 feet.
Correct. Especially not in Texas.
Yes, or Oklahoma. Absolutely not. Yeah, one of the things about these accreditation programs is they're designed to not allow you to be static. That they do this because they want you to constantly get better. Anybody could get to a point and just stay there, but they don't want that. I mean, when I was in the fire department, we don't want you to stay static. We want you to get better. We want you to improve response times. We want you to improve personnel. We want you to improve apparatus and stuff like that. So they set these goals so you constantly have to get better. It's easy to stay static, but getting better requires this effort. And this, I imagine with parks, it's the same with the fire department. It's a challenge to do that, but it keeps making you a better department.
Yeah, you're either making dust or you're eating dust, is what they say, right?
Yeah,
I love that phrase.
That's actually it. That's actually a great way to put it.
And our city is growing, and it's changing and evolving, and we really owe it to the community to always be on top of that professionalism and making sure that we're meeting those standards, because we are a world-class city, and I would say that we have a world-class parks department and system. But me saying it doesn't mean as much as a really rigorous review by outside parties who are methodical about that review. And so we're happy to do it, and I'll be very excited when it's done, because it really is a significant effort to make sure that it goes well.
Great. So coming up in the new year, we kind of touched this a little bit. Fisher's Canyon Open Space continues its master planning process. How much longer will that process go through before you're ready to just adopt the plan and go?
I should know the answer to this. I think it's June as when we hope to have the plan finalized. And
that may be a moving target too, because Blodgett, we extended that process a little bit.
We did. I think we're making really good progress. So we came out with 2 alternatives at our last public meeting, and I think the feedback was, can you come up with something in between the 2? So on the 22nd next week, we'll have a public meeting where we reveal the in-between option that tries to address that desire. And I think it's a really good plan. It's so different from the others. We have Cheyenne Mountain State Park so close on the boundary. And so there are lots of opportunities for connection. And connection might be the best word to explain the big opportunities at Fisher's.
Cool. So we talked a little bit about Pikes Peak. One of the things with Pikes Peak is it's a national forest. but with a lot of jurisdictions around it, Colorado Springs, Manitou Springs, Woodland Park, Cripple Creek, Victor. You've got the state has a piece of that. It's a lot of different jurisdictions that are involved in there. Colorado Springs Utilities has land on there. It is a mishmash of management that happens there. The Ring to Peak Trail, which is kind of mostly sort of done, but there's an 8-mile gap in there because it crosses jurisdictional boundaries and private properties. But it sees a lot of tourism. It sees a lot of recreation, and managing that has been an issue. The Forest Service will tell you that they only have so much, and we should note that the Forest Service in its entirety through the entire country took a huge budget hit for 2021. No seasonal hires other than fire, my understanding. No seasonal hires anywhere in the Forest Service system. I mean, that's a huge hit to the Forest Service. And that's going to affect us here in Pikes Peak. The seasonal people who would do trail work and stuff like that are just not going to be hired. There's just no money for that. So Governor Polis announced a little bit ago that they're working, I guess I'll have you describe it, but basically coming up to some kind of plan for a comprehensive all-in-one management plan for all of this Pikes Peak. So tell us what that means for Pikes Peak and what it means for the city and what it means for your department.
And I might start with that piece first, because a lot of people don't know that Pikes Peak, America's Mountain, is a highway corridor that takes you up to the Summit Visitor Center. We operate that as an enterprise of the city, but it's operated on Forest Service land. So it's done with a special use permit that the United States Forest Service gives to us to follow. And we are partners with the Forest Service through that entire process, but they're in control. It's their property. We're just operating it. And then we have our partners with the reservoirs on the north slope and south slope of Pikes Peak, and that is Colorado Springs Utilities. And their number one mission is to provide a municipal water supply for our city that is safe and that is healthy. However, they're also willing and open to recreational opportunities that help so long as it doesn't compromise their mission. So we also operate the north and south slope through the Pikes Peak staffing in order to provide some of those recreational opportunities. And sometimes it's kind of frustrating because the reservoirs need lots of maintenance, and we had to drain Crystal Reservoir in order to make some repairs to the dam. And, people see that recreational opportunity, and it's really exciting because it's so beautiful up there. And there's sometimes some frustration because we want to recreate, but there's also a purpose behind the work that's being done with the reservoirs. So everybody has a little bit different purpose. The city of Colorado Springs is right in the middle of that, making sure that we are supporting our partners and helping to provide those experiences. And what it really means is that there are a lot of different land managers, as you alluded to, a couple of different counties, different opportunities, but also different missions. What is exciting, and Governor Polis mentioned this in his State of the State address, is that Colorado Parks and Wildlife is able to help us with some of the things that I think are really impactful and that we can't do in our city jurisdiction, and that is with enforcement of laws and with operations and management. We've had really good experience with them at Cheyenne Mountain State Park, which is another example of working together and kind of coordinating your strengths and really coming out with a win-win at the end. So what Governor Polis was mentioning was an agreement to pursue greater participation along those lines. We call it a letter of intent because it's all the different land manager agencies, and along with some elected officials as well, agreeing that on the Ring the Peak Trail we would all coordinate our capacities and hopefully be able to make some good progress on finalizing that wonderful recreational trail corridor and its opportunities. And recognizing that if we're successful in that effort, there's so many other opportunities available to us. But that's going to be the first step, is really focusing on the Ring of the Peak, which a lot of people have put very dedicated time into, and we really are at the kind of the end game, hopefully, with that. Not a lot of that's within jurisdiction that the city of Colorado Springs would specifically operate or maintain, but we want to be good partners. And my number one focus is being a good partner across all of these interests and stakeholder groups, so that we can ultimately have that really nice balanced blend of land conservation, habitat stewardship, and recreational potential.
So the example that's being used for this idea is like the Arkansas headwaters, like out in Buena Vista and Salida, which is a long strip of the Arkansas River from, I guess, almost Leadville clear into Canyon City. Crosses many jurisdictional boundaries. I don't know how many counties it goes through, how many towns it goes through, federal land. It's Fish and Wildlife Service and National Forest and on all these different lands. And they developed a plan. It took some time, where CPW kind of manages it, but it's not their property. They're just kind of, you guys have the resources and the people, you kind of manage it, but we all have our hands in what's going on here. That's kind of what the idea is with this. Is that a safe assumption, at least the idea right now, where that's going?
That's one of the models that we looked at, and we said, look, it is successful when you take the strengths of every organization and really put those in the best places. So along the river corridor, they do have Colorado Parks and Wildlife maintaining a lot of those opportunities for recreational use, and it's worked wonderfully. Of course, on Pikes Peak, it's going to have its own twist, because it's a little different, but we know that it was successful there, so we have reason to believe that we can all work together and find the right strengths to augment here as well.
So the idea is not that this is going to be, it's not going to become a state park, it's not going to change, nobody's ownership of anything is going to change. This is just a management plan.
It's really operational and management focused.
Okay.
And I think that we've shown in different ways. My favorite example, more so than maybe the Arkansas River, is really the Cheyenne Mountain State Park example, where we have the capacity with land acquisitions for open space. And some people don't know that quite a bit of the Cheyenne Mountain State Park was purchased with the TOPS program, but it's operated and maintained by Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and they do a beautiful job. Sure. And it's a wonderful amenity for the community members here in the Pikes Peak region. So what a wonderful way to put our strengths together and shore up our weaknesses. Our city parks department could not run Cheyenne Mountain State Park on top of everything else that we run. So it's a wonderful way to coordinate and amplify on what we do well.
So this thing that the governor announced is strictly an agreement for everybody to get together and talk about it.
It's a letter of intent to find those next steps. And so, it's actually a really big thing.
It's a big step.
To get all of the different, groups to say, yes, this is what we want to do. We want to work together for this purpose on the Ring of the Peak Trail, which will be an amenity for the whole region.
We've been talking about that for a bazillion years, getting something done there.
We've done a lot, too.
Well, there has been a lot. There has been a lot done on it. There are a lot of partners in that, TOSC and Friends of the Peak, and so many groups involved in that. So I guess what I want to get to is managing people's expectations. Nothing is going to change there for a little while. It's going to take a while, A, to hammer out this agreement, and then B, implement whatever this agreement turns into.
Exactly. So Stay tuned and know that the people that are working on it are dedicated to working together and being respectful of everybody's missions, but we think we can make some progress there, and that would be the best benefit for all. It's
a step in the right direction, I think. The CPW definitely has its strengths, especially being a completely independently funded statewide enterprise, and with their Keep Colorado Wild Pass, they are really raking in the money, so they have the resources to do this, and that's awesome. I think
it's been a game changer.
It has been a huge game changer,
and hopefully for us as well with this.
Yeah, this is a great step. Britt, I've taken up an hour of your time already. I can't believe it's been an hour. Do you have anything else you want to say before we go? I don't want to take up any more of your time. You've got, I'm sure, more important things to do than sit here and talk to me. But
oh, gosh, it's always so good to spend time with you and to talk about the park system here in the city of Colorado Springs. And I can't think of anything to cover additionally. I'll probably think of something later and wish I'd said it.
I usually do that too. Like, why did I ask this question? Well, with that, Britt, thank you so much again for spending time with us. I think there's some really good information here for people to, understand what happened this past year and look forward to the coming year. A lot of things are going to happen. I think it's going to be a pretty exciting time. So with that, everyone, thank you for listening to the Outdoors Hiking Bob podcast. We'll talk to you next time.